Tiffany, Lloyd, how you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you.
That's good. That's good. So, uh, you know, I discovered you in a way that was not the usual way that I discovered folks up until the pandemic started. And that is, I think it was on Facebook actually.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah. And I was like, man, she can play. And then I started, I looked at your website and I looked at a lot of the stuff that you've done, and I was like, man, I got to get her on here.
I appreciate it.
Oh, you got it. You got it. So, yeah. So why don't you tell us about yourself? Tell us, maybe how you grew up and, earliest sort of interactions with music, maybe the kind of music that was common in your home growing up, and maybe musical relatives or early mentors, teachers, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, oddly enough, it's only two musicians in my family, myself and one of my sisters. I have a few sisters. But I started out on piano. I grew up in New Jersey, and my sister used to play piano. She also sings as well. And I used to hear her and see her play piano, and I wanted to do what she did. Everything she did, I wanted to do. I was the little sister that wanted to copy my sister. And so I was inspired by her to even get into music. And, I grew up, I started learning piano by ear all on my own. And then my mom put me in piano lessons. But all along I was in school, I played sports, a lot of sports. I played basketball, track, all gymnastics, all that kind of stuff. And, but I always stuck to music. I always had a desire to be a musician of some sort. I didn't know exactly what, but I was always into music. So when I was in high school, I always say bass found me. So that's when I started playing bass. And I did revisit music. I did revisit piano. My pastor wanted me to learn how to read music. So I went to a school and learned how to read music on piano. And then I started to get busy with bass again. So I kind of put that aside a little bit. And then I went back to, starting to really play out. I listened to growing up, a lot of rap music, R&B. I wasn't really into jazz until high school, college, undergrad, lots of gospel. So I really pretty much grew up playing in church. And that gave me the skill set to play other genres, once I stepped outside of church a little bit. So that's my background musically, a lot of gospel. But like I said, for enjoyment, especially in high school, I listened to a lot of R&B, rap, stuff like that. But when it came to playing, I played a lot of gospel. Then I got into jazz and different genres, even go-go. I'm based out of DC. So, I had to learn that genre. That was brand new to me, at first. So, but that's pretty much, my upbringing with music and, just how I grew up. I played a lot of sports, like I said, but music was my focal point. So,
yes. Now, so you're religious. You said you're pastor.
Yes.
And I'm Christian myself, and I'm the minister of music at a church in Columbus. It's a Second Baptist Church.
Nice.
It's a missionary Baptist church.
Okay.
I think it might be. If it's not the oldest, it's like the second oldest black church in Ohio.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I've worked at different churches. My first. I didn't grow up in church playing.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in church, but the kind of church that I went to, that just never really linked up that way. So it wasn't until I was in college actually that I started playing in church. And so see, it must have been maybe junior or something in college, and a pastor, a friend of mine, still good friends, he asked me to come to church. He said, "Hey, why don't you come bring your horn with you?" I was like, "Okay." So I brought my horn, and then, you know, the rest is history, as they say. And I was doing like a part-time band director thing, and then when I finished my my master's degree, my first full-time job was at church. He was playing in church. I was band director and the pastor's assistant.
Nice.
Yeah, and so that's been a very important part of my musical journey. Something that, fortunately, with the way that we're doing church, you know, I'm still playing there every week. It's just there's no congregation. It's a limited number of folks, and we're doing the live streaming thing. You probably have some experience with that. All of us do.
Yes. Right. Lots of, yeah.
Okay, so you know, something that's been a pretty, I don't know, a pretty common topic is, you know, this whole like supposed sacred secular thing, right?
Oh, right.
And there's some folks that have this view that you know, if you play in church, you should really only play in church. You shouldn't be doing anything else, that kind of stuff. Do you have any thoughts about that? And I'm sure if you grew up in church, I'm sure that you've had conversations about this topic. So
I have, yes, indeed. I actually have a lot of viewpoints on it. And my view has changed over the years. You know, when I first was only playing in church, especially when I was aspiring to be a full-time musician, you know, in my head, I was like, okay, I'm only going to play in church, you know. And then once I started playing church, I got better and better, and more opportunities opened up, and I really saw the music world a little differently. I said, I have to travel the world and play. I can't only play in church. And I never looked down on playing in church, because for me, I'm grateful. If I could do it all over again, start in church, you know, and then go outwards like that, I would do it 10 times that way. Yep. But I have a different view as far as playing outside of church. I feel like, you know, God puts us on this earth as musicians, as far as like just as musicians. You know, you have a gift, but it's not to only reach the church. You know, I feel like music is a tool. So it's not a tool that should only be used in one place. It's like, kind of like, I can't think of the scripture right offhand, but it's like, it's not the church that needs a church. So it's, yes, play in church, but I think you should also play outside of church. It also opens you up as a musician. You know, if you only play one genre, you're going to be limited. And if that's, you know, supposed to be for the sake of only playing in church, to me, that doesn't really add up. So I have a few different, you know, probably not traditional viewpoints on that, you know, as far as just only playing in church. But for me, it has made me more of a well-rounded musician, you know. And then also, it's all about, really, to me, the church is in you. So I should be able to go in a club or out the country and play, and people see God in me and be drawn. If that's, you know, the whole stigma with playing in church versus playing outside of church as well, you know, if you carry the church with you, you're still in church. Granted, every place is different. You can't really make that a literal statement, but, you know, my viewpoint is you should play everywhere, not anywhere that's dangerous or you just don't fit or, you know, it's too far out. But I think a lot of musicians should play outside of church as well as in church. Yeah.
Interesting, you know, and from a, you know, making a living perspective, there's only very few folks that can only play music in church. There's only a few churches that can pay enough to sustain your livelihood. And or
thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
And or that you could even, probably pay half of what it was that you could make doing other things. So there is that sort of practical issue. Something I think about.
Good example.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
The pandemic, I think, brought that to light for a lot too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Facts. So, it's interesting, this whole topic. I have, thought about this, labored, over this, and okay. So you said something about tradition, depending on whatever the tradition is.
Right.
And yeah, that's true, because it's only recently, since the Protestant Reformation, that that there was even this whole concoction we call the sacred secular dichotomy.
Right.
This is actually a false dichotomy. It's an artifact of the Protestant Reformation, because prior to that, it was much simpler when you dealt with the arts. Whatever is beautiful glorifies God. Very simple, right? And something that doesn't require a lot of stipulation, right? A lot of stipulations. So there's that. And then obviously all of us labor over this. I mean, if you're a believer, if I'm, there's what I call baby take your clothes off music. And obviously that has a particular purpose. And that's not really what I want to do. That's not really what I want to play. I would like to play music that, maybe has a little more lofty ideals, when possible. And so as much as I can, I try to avoid doing certain kinds of gigs, but honestly, that's not really an assessment of the sacredness or secularness of that music. It's just there's particular topics that I don't particularly think are positive, and I'm trying to do positive stuff. So it's just it's an easier sort of equation. And then of course you have this sort of liturgical music, right? So liturgical was not in a way to say this is better than non-liturgical music. It wasn't to say that at all. It was just, this music has a specific purpose. It was constructed to line up with a liturgy in a church. It's just that simple. Right? Nothing more special about it than that. So sometimes we start conflating these ideas, and then we come up with some weird concoctions, and then it starts to get way more complicated than it needs to get. And it's not really complicated. If it's beautiful and it glorifies God, there it is. That's all you need. Yeah. At least that's the way I that's been where I have rested my case. So so what is it about music that is so compelling that you would want to do it for a living?
For me, it's almost like, well, not almost, I was born to do it, but it's not even a thing of effort where I'm like, oh, I just, I have to do it for a living, obviously, but at the same time, it's effortless. It's not like, oh, I really want to go and be a veterinarian, but I'm going to do music for a living. For me, it's a privilege. It's definitely a privilege that I never take for granted, but, it's a gift. It's a purpose. It's a calling. So it's like, I almost feel like I have no choice if that makes sense. It's like, not for me, if I wasn't playing for a living, I feel like I would be depressed, things like that is what, makes me tick. So I can't imagine not doing it for a living.
Yes, I understand. I'm director of jazz studies at Ohio State, and part of my job is recruiting students. I'm professor of jazz saxophone, and so that's my first priority,
right.
Is to recruit students from my studio. And I've had, at this point, I've had hundreds of students.
Wow. Yeah,
and it's a big school, so. There's an expectation to have a certain number of students in the studio. That's sort of the justification for what, that's, that's why they hired me. So,
right.
But more and more, the students that, in the past were sort of on the bubble, students that okay, well, I think if they work really hard, then I think that they'll be able to play in a rock band, or they'll be able to play whatever, they'll be able to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And okay, that's cool, and who am I to tell them that they can't do it, right?
Right.
But the more now, I've gotten to this point now where those sort of bubble students, I'm not going to accept them.
Right.
And the reason I'm not going to accept them is not because it's not because I don't necessarily think that there may be a pathway for them. I mean, maybe there is.
Right.
I'm not trying to, crap on their dreams or anything.
Right.
It's just, I know how hard the music industry is.
Oh, yes.
And I know what you have. Yeah, I know what you have to have. And there are so many incredibly talented musicians that are not working. Incredibly, and then you look at, we're in this pandemic, and there's a lot of incredible, great musicians that are not working.
Yep.
And many of which feel the same way that you do, that it's a calling, that you couldn't do anything else. You would be miserable, without it. That's the way I feel. I feel like I'm stuck with music.
Right.
I'm totally stuck with it. If I wasn't doing it, I would be totally miserable. I'm capable of doing other things. I have other interests, but everything has to center around music, or it's just
Yep.
And if a student doesn't have that, if they don't have that need, I can't take that student.
Right. I totally agree. Yeah.
I can't take them, because and there's varying degrees of natural ability, and there is some debate over how much natural ability do you actually need. Right. And of course, the Malcolm Gladwell book, Outliers, he sort of deals with that topic. And he comes to this equation. If you have, whatever this amount that you need to have, whatever that level of talent is, then you need 10,000 hours.
Right. Yeah.
And the 10,000 hours is based on all of these subjects, musicians, athletes, all kinds of folks, scientists. And now the 10,000 hours is no guarantee of necessary success, being able to make a living doing that, but it is the baseline requirement for success.
Yeah, it is. It is. I agree totally. It's funny. Before I even knew about that book, when I first started taking like professional bass lessons, my mentor told me, he said, spend 6 to 8 hours a day practicing. And I'm like, that's a lot of hours. But after my first lesson, I went home with the homework he gave me, and it literally took me 6 to 8 hours, sometimes 8 hours solid, to actually execute everything he told me to practice. And I thought about it because at that time I still wanted to go full time. And I said, I think to become a full-time musician, work full-time hours, the traditional full-time hours, but to be a full-time musician, I got to put in full-time hours of practice. And that was my way to God saying, hey, I'm going to show you that I want to do this thing full-time. I'm going to put in full-time practice while I'm not even out there yet. And he literally honored that. He saw my hard work. And I literally went from spending full-time hours. I would split it up like 4 hours, full-time hours working, practicing, trying to perfect this craft and get up to the industry standard, to the point where now, obviously, when you're a full-time musician, you're working way more than 8 hours a day, but it panned out. And then I found out about that book and I said, makes sense, makes sense. But yeah.
So the practicing thing is I've spent a lot of hours practicing, and you have too. And the practice room is this sort of interesting place where you can learn like so much about yourself. Yes. Right. I interviewed Walt Weiskopf, the great tenor saxophonist. He's the saxophone player in Steely Dan.
Oh, okay.
I also got a when I was doing my undergrad, I went to Western Michigan University. Okay. He came and did a week-long residency, and so I got a lesson with him then, and then we've been friends ever since. Nice. And he says he has a few things, and I learned these that week of his residency, and I still use them in my teaching. But one of the things that he said was, never perform in the practice room.
Wow.
And never perform in the practice room.
Interesting.
Right. Mm-hmm. So then, of course, the question is what is a performance? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then, if a performance is something that has been perfected for public presentation, then that shouldn't be the thing that you play in the practice room.
Right.
And then he will go further. He says, everyone deserves an opportunity to sound terrible.
I agree. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in these music schools, conservatories and stuff, the practice rooms are all they're all in the same area, right. And so you can hear what someone else is practicing. Mm-hmm. Right. And so often is the case that you want to sound good, right? Right. Other people can hear, so I want to sound good, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this temptation to stop actually producing results, right, and to start performing.
Yeah.
And of course, the more performing you do in the practice room, the less effective your practice time will be.
Exactly. You should be struggling through practice. I feel like if you're playing smoothly, no mess ups, you're not practicing, you're having fun at that point, so I agree.
Wait a minute, practice is not supposed to be fun?
It's supposed to be fun and a struggle, right? Yeah.
Right.
And similar to what you were saying earlier, I'm the same way as far as like looking at students, like, you know, some people, especially me being a female musician, you know, a lot of parents want their children, if they have a girl, I get this a lot. I want my daughter to be like you. And I'm like, just know I'll take her on as a private student, but I teach in a way to groom them to be a real musician. Like, I'm not going to teach you how to play as a hobby. So don't waste your time or your money if you just want them to, you know, just, she can play bass, you know, don't send, because immediately the student's going to get, whether it's an adult or a child, they're going to get frustrated because I'm going to give them real tasks that they're going to have to hammer away at in the practice room and not have fun, but just really, you know, work. So I agree with the whole, you know, some students you take, some students you don't, because, you know, and I feel like too, with the whole talent level, it's not so much how talented they are, it's really what desire is really in their heart. You know, you have some people that aren't that talented, but it's just like they can't live unless they become a musician. And, you know, you can really see it. They have what it takes. They're not in it for the limelight. They just have this burning desire. They might not be the most talented, but you most likely will want to go ahead and take them on versus you ask them why they want to be a musician or an artist, and they're like, I want to be on stage with Cardi B. Well, you're probably not going to last 5 minutes in this industry, you know? So yeah, little clues.
Speaking of baby, take your clothes off music. Anyhow, sorry, I had to stick that in there. Yeah, you know, when I was, I started when I was really young. And my dad was a great saxophone player. I heard him playing around the house, and I kept pestering him and bugging him until he would start teaching me. And that was when I was 6.
Wow.
And so I lived with my teacher.
Right, literally.
So I had, 3 or 4 lessons a week and a very attentive ear on the practice room. Hey, hold up. Go back. That wasn't right.
Yeah.
And he had all these sayings, and again, these are sayings that I use these all the time with my students. One of them was there's no such thing as hard or easy, just more or less familiar.
Yes.
Because that's the thing that people do. He's like, oh, this is so hard, and so you have to do whatever you can do to try to change the sort of your perspective on whatever it is. Right. And because if your brain leads everything that you do.
Yes.
The way you think about things, that leads everything that you do. So if that's already right from the beginning, if that's already in the way, you're not doing anything. You're done.
Right.
Yeah. So you have to have a perspective on it. Another thing that he would do, which I found, which over the years, admittedly, I have sort of lost some of this, and as of late, I've tried to start regaining this and start to, again, it's sort of the perspective on what it is. But anytime we would, it would be time for a lesson, it would be time to practice. He never said the word practice.
Oh, okay.
He would say, go get your horn and let's play.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so it was always about playing, because you're with your dad, you're playing with your dad, and especially I started when I was young, so I was still in that sort of play mode, and so he capitalized on that. But what has happened over the years is I'm a very duty and sort of disciplined, kind of oriented person. I'm not a square or anything, but order is important. And so, I'm the type of person that I could eat the same thing every day if it was already there ready for me to eat it. Right. Okay. So the same thing with even thinking about practicing. Right. I go, okay, you don't have to like to practice, and I tell my students this all the time. I don't like practicing. I mean, maybe 3% of the time I'll actually want to do it.
Right.
But, you don't have to want to do it. You just have to do it.
Exactly.
And even just that one thought, you don't have to want to do it. You just have to do it. There's something liberating, I think, about that. Yes,
indeed.
Because I think a lot of people think that there's something wrong with them because they don't want to do these. Don't want to do the work associated with something that they love.
Exactly. Yeah.
No,
and
that just means
too,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right, you're just human. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't cut you off either. A friend of mine, and I mimic this too as well. Posted, on social media. A lot of people post the best product. We all do, myself included. But one day I was inspired to post a clip of me practicing and messing up. I was just working on an exercise. And instead of me only showing when I perfected it, I said, you know what, let me show a little of where I was messing up. And I just wanted to bring that to the platform because I'm like, this is real practice. By the time I perfect it, I'm not practicing. I've perfected it. Now it's time to work on something else that, but I think because of what people see and everything, they feel like, man, I got to practice. Well, why am I not motivated? Like you said, some people feel like there's something wrong with them if they're not doing cartwheels into the practice room, So yeah, that's a lot. There's a lot of truth to that. But.
Yeah, the motivation thing. So there's a lot of companies that make a lot of money on motivation.
Yep.
And I want to say that motivation is BS. That's what I want to say. But I also know that message would not really be received well because most people, everybody has been so heavily marketed, this sort of, make it easy or, sit on the couch, take this pill and you'll lose the weight.
Right.
Don't change your diet. Don't go to the gym.
Right.
Don't do anything healthy. Don't do any of that. Just take these 2 pills and you're good. So no effort.
Yeah.
There seems to be this thing where there's just so much time spent on trying to, show you different ways how to get motivated. And I'm like, look, just give up on that.
Yeah.
Why does that matter? Do you really want to do this or not? And if you want to do it, you'll do it.
You'll do it. Exactly. That's it. That's what it boils down to. You're right. Yeah.
You can say that again, that last part again.
You're right.
You're right part.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this conversation.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotta have some fun sometimes here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's not what I'm saying, what we're saying is not to say that fun cannot be part of, practicing. Frankly, there are aspects of my practicing that I enjoy more than others.
Yeah.
But some of this has to do with. I think there's a different. Okay, so the difference between happiness and joy. right? So happiness, that's flimsy. Right? Happiness changes when something happens. If something happens that's different than what you wanted, the happiness leaves.
Exactly. Yep.
If something happens the way you like it, the way you want it to, you know, and notice in the what is it in our founding, some of our founding documents for the country, this freedom of the pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
Now notice it doesn't say happiness, it says the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
So it seems that they even knew that happiness was something that was not going to be permanent.
Right.
But it's not going to be a state of a regular state of affairs. It's going to ebb and flow. It's going to go up and down, like the weather,
like the stock market.
Like the stock market. Yeah, that's right. Like Bitcoin.
Right.
So happiness, but joy, that's a different thing, right?
It is. Yeah.
And it's a deeper thing. It is an abiding thing, right? A lasting thing, a
consistent.
It's consistent, right? The joy of the Lord is my strength. It's something that it's going to be there.
It's going to be there if there's positive things going on or negative things going on. It's going to be there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the way that I try to think about practicing is more about enjoyment. And enjoyment is not the same as liking everything that's happening. It's more about the journey along the continuum, right?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it helps. For me as a musician, it helped, and it probably would help others too, to look at practicing not only from a musician's perspective. Like I looked up to Kobe Bryant a lot, and also other he was a basketball player. His routine, his practice regimen was insane. And then I look at other people, a lot of people look at people like Beyonce, they look at the performance aspect, and they have their opinions on her performance and all that kind of stuff. But I look at her routine behind the scenes. Her rehearsal schedule is like Kobe Bryant. And it, you look at some of these people, some of the greats, I always say I look at other people as well, like actresses like Taraji Henson and some of those, as they say, goats, in the industry. And you just listen to their interviews and you look at their practice routines. It's consistent. It's, like you said, it's not really happiness there all the time, but it's joy. It's something that they're going to do it, no matter what's going on, if it's good feelings, bad feelings, negative. Kobe could have had a horrible season with the team, but his practice regimen never stopped. It never changed. The same thing with other, performers in whatever side of the industry. So it helps to look at, because, sometimes musicians only look at other musicians, and even the greats, Jocko, sometimes we only look at those other musicians, but it helps to look at a lot of the greats that did other things. It's a consistent thing among all of them, and it kind of helps you not feel so bad about how hard it is sometimes to just practice. But
yes. So how about influences? Who do you listen to?
Oddly enough, I don't really listen to a lot of other bass players. Now I did listen to for season a lot of John Petitucci, a little bit of Jocko, not a whole lot. Matthew Garrison, Richard Bona, but after a while, I also started listening to a lot of organ players. Corey Henry. I love listening to him. I get inspired by a lot of different instruments. Adlin Cruz, he's a classical pianist, and I listen to people like that as well. So my taste changes with what I'm listening to, what instruments, saxophone players, I pull from different instruments. I like to approach bass from other perspectives besides just bass. Like a bass perspective. So get inspired by it.
Yeah, I hear that. So you can see those basses behind me on the wall.
I do. I've been checking them out.
Yeah. So let's see here. There's a Conklin. It's a Bill Dickens model Conklin. It's a 7-string, and then there's the one in the that's like the one that's like right over the point in my head right there. That's a Marcus that's what is it, the Sire Marcus Miller 5 and then the blue one is what is that? It's like a Harley Benton it's their enhanced model or whatever. It's also a 5-string. It's a PJ.
Oh.
And there's a bunch of other stuff that's on the wall over there, guitars and stuff. But I've got a keyboard right in front of me, the two keyboards in front of me. So I'm influenced by other instruments also, and I do a lot of arranging and composing, producing and stuff. And one of the old tricks that composers, even going way back to some of the great classical composers, what they would do is they was like, okay, well, I'm going to write this clarinet concerto. Well, I got to learn how to play clarinet.
Right.
I got to go over here and I need to get this happening. The latest instrument for me is guitar, and I guess at this point I've been playing guitar for about 7 years or something now. But I was playing. I was working at a big church. It was a mega church in Columbus, and I worked there for 5.5 years. The first year I was there, I didn't play any guitar, but I was doing a lot of writing for guitar and it's a big evangelical church, so it was always like 2 or 3 guitars on the stage, and not including the bass guitar. And so I was like, okay, well, I know how to write for stuff generally, but I was like, I really want to get inside. I want to have another layer of something. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, let me get a guitar. Let me learn how to play the instrument. And then I just fell in love with it. And then I started spending way too much time at Guitar Center and too much money and stuff like that. So that's how that goes.
I get it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but the gear thing is like real. That whole gear mode, okay, I get this other piece of gear. Oh, now now that I have that, oh man, but there's this other piece of gear, and they just keep making more and more stuff, and it's supposed to be better and better. And
right, makes your life easier.
Hard to fight it off.
Right, it is so hard, so hard. That's a never-ending process there. Yep. So, yeah.
I tell my students, I don't really like to practice. I practice a lot, right? But I don't really like to practice, but I love to fart around.
Oh yeah, that's always fun.
Oh, that's my favorite. Oh, I can do that for hours and hours. Just like sitting on the couch with a guitar on my lap,
Yep.
not really practicing anything in particular, playing on it,
Right.
watching Game of Thrones or something,
Yeah.
or I have, a bunch of gear, it's like, oh yeah, well, let me get this other sound. Hey,
Yeah.
man, but what if I do this,
Right.
I can waste a lot of time.
Oh yeah. Hours gone by. You're like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Get it. Get it.
All right. Oh, one thing I was going to say, and you talking about teaching, which students that you decide that you're going to teach or not. The teaching thing for me sort of came later.
Okay.
So now that makes sense, of course. Sequentially, it makes sense. You should be able to play before you're teaching anybody. Otherwise, you're just spreading your poison.
Right. That's very true.
What are you gonna do? Teach them? Yeah. What are you gonna do? Teach them how not to play?
Right.
Anyhow.
Yeah.
But I started young, and so I had the opportunity to teach some students when I was pretty young, because I was totally possessed by music. That's all I wanted to do is play all the time. And so I was 12 or something, and I started getting some students. And I remember having this one kid, and I gave him some pretty not ridiculous stuff to practice.
Right.
And he came back, and he would kept coming back, and he hadn't done the stuff, right?
Oh no. Yeah.
He hadn't done the stuff, and let me tell you, I was because I didn't understand. I really didn't understand. Like, this is like serious. This is this is like life or death here. And you're,
Right.
It was like disrespectful to the music. It was just, it was it was all of that.
Right.
And I'm like 12 or something, right? And I'm having all of these pretty, it's like I should have chilled. You're right. I should have like chilled out. It's like, dude, the kid is like, I think the kid I was teaching was like 9 or something, 9 or 10. And so, but I started when I was 6, and so I'm like, hey, I was serious. Why ain't you serious?
Right.
So anyhow, I remember just developing a real like. I was like, I hate teaching. I don't want to teach. Teaching's not for me. I don't want to feel like this. Forget it. Pretty much.
At 12.
And it wasn't until I was in college. I'm serious. It was not until I was in college, and I was teaching a Bible study. And we were going through some sort of lesson where they were going through what your sort of motivational gift was. And there's some teachers and some, sort of exhorters, and some folks that are motivated by service and like this. And every time I looked at the list, I kept trying to pick something other than teacher, because I hate teaching, right? Because that was in my head,
Right.
and so they came to me. They were like, "Look, man, I know you have this thing, whatever this story when you was a kid and you didn't want to teach, and so that's hogwash, man. You're a teacher." You're like, no. And it's funny because I was teaching the Bible study, right? And,
wow.
So it wasn't just that. It was all of the different ways that I'm oriented. It's all about teaching.
Right.
It's all about teaching. And so I finally was like, okay, all right, I guess I'm a teacher. So, and the rest is history.
Right. Wow.
But it's just funny how that goes.
Yeah. You had no choice. You know.
I did not.
Yeah.
I did not.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So, can you share some of your favorite moments on the stage?
Yeah. I talked about this one not too long ago. I remember there was a gig I did so Lynn Whitfield was like, it was with her. And it was just, for me, it was one of those, oh my gosh moments, because I used to watch her as a little girl on TV, in movies. And, she's a wonderful actress. And I would always see her, just watching my little movies. And, she was in a lot of different movies. And I'm like, wow, didn't think a whole lot of it. But one day I ended up on stage with her and I'm like, oh my God, and she had been there. We had already been working with her. It just hit me like, this is the same lady that I used to watch in the movies. And now I'm sharing the stage with her. So that was a really beautiful moment.
Thin line between love and hate.
Yeah. One of those movies that I was like,
that's one of my favorite joints. I can watch that, I can just keep watching it, and I can watch it every day almost. There's something just about that movie, and it's not it's not the greatest movie ever, and it doesn't necessarily have the greatest acting, but it's just the way that the story's told and the time period that it was in.
Yeah.
And there's just something about that I just dig it.
Yeah, I did. Cool. It's a great movie overall, Yeah, that was definitely let's see. There's always cool moments. There was another one. It wasn't so much on the stage, but I was with a band and we were actually, one of my really good friends, she's a pianist, and we were doing a show at this big place in DC, and we were opening for Gladys Knight. So it's kind of a funny story. It's kind of behind the scenes. We were opening for Gladys Knight, and before the show started, I was trying to find the green room that we were supposed to be in. And I just kind of wandered into Gladys Knight's green room. Nobody was in there. And so I didn't know it was her room. So I'm just in there, I saw the T station and the outlets. I plugged my phone up and I'm having tea. I'm having a nice little time, and then the show got ready to start. So I went on out, got on the stage and all that. We did our thing. After the whole show was over, I went back to the room to get my phone and still had no idea I was in her green room. And I get to the door and there's a bodyguard there. And I'm like, yeah, I just want to go in there and get my, he's like, can I help you? And I'm like, I kind of have all my stuff in there. He's like, this is Gladys Knight's room. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know. It was just a funny moment. And she just it was really something I'll never forget. But it all worked out. She's like, oh, cool, get your stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just,
so she was gracious.
Very gracious.
I'll tell you, one of the worst things that can happen to you is to meet your hero and they're like a jerk, they're terrible, they're not a good person.
Yes.
And so I'm glad that went that she was gracious and kind and stuff. But there's it seems to me stories. It seems to me that there's a disproportionate number of jerks. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It is. It's what it is. But it's funny. I find with the more known mainstream artists that I've worked with, they're the ones that are really nice, really humble, as you can say, cool, everyday type people. When you work with them or meet them or whatever, and then it's not every more local, not as known artist, but some, they're the ones that tend to be jerks. I haven't run into a lot, but I've more so heard stories of some that are, I've been fortunate so far to mostly work with really nice people on both sides, the mainstream and the not yet mainstream ones. But I've heard like too many stories of those run-ins, with, so yes.
Have you worked with Yolanda Adams?
Yes, I have a couple of times. She's amazing. And she is one of the nicest, most sweetest, humble people, that I've worked with. And that's one of my examples, mainstream and the nicest, to work with. So her whole team is beautiful. But yeah, that's one of those great stories. Yeah, she's yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So how about the future? What does the future hold? What projects are you working on now? And are you like teaching lessons online or anything?
Yeah, I am. So before COVID, I had my students in a studio that I work out of, but now I'm still in the studio, but I have them on Zoom. So all of my students are on Zoom now, which is pretty cool because before COVID, I was never really a fan of Skype and, the virtual lesson thing, and then kind of had to just go with the flow of what happened with the pandemic. So now the cool thing is I have, students in different time zones, and it works, I can get more in as much as I can handle outside of everything else. So, but as far as what's next, I have 2 singles out, but I'm starting to work on my EP. That's next. And then the other thing is, knowing that the pandemic is not going to be forever, I've been working on my next show, my next artist show, like my own concert. So I haven't dived into the live stream as far as like doing personal concerts. I've been doing a lot of broadcasting and, pre-recording with churches and even just different artists and stuff like that. But I know a lot of my friends are doing a lot of, the live concerts, virtual concerts. I haven't done it. I miss I'm kind of new to the stage as far as being an artist. So I've been doing my own shows for 3 years now. So, but I got like bitten by that bug of the live stage, the live audience for doing my concerts. So I'm just like, okay, I might have to do one of these virtual concerts one day, but still I'm preparing for just the next live, all the way live audience, what I'm used to type of live concert. So.
Yeah, honestly, the 2 things that I missed the most when the pandemic hit, the 2 things I missed the most were the gym and the stage.
Oh, yes.
Facts. And I was still playing because the church I work at, I was still playing every week at the church, but there's no congregation, and
there's no congregation.
I was doing yeah. And then a number of, live stream concerts and stuff, but there's no audience, and it's like, right. Fortunately, tomorrow night, my band, Dr. Thunder Quartet, is performing at a club.
Nice.
And we live stream. So that's become the thing. So what I did was, this past summer, I just started on this thing. Well, I want to do a date once a month. I started playing at this club called Blue Velvet Room, and I played there for like 3 months. And then the guy that was the owner of the place, and he was like single-handedly like keeping a bunch of cats working in the pandemic. He was single-handedly like, and this cat was not making any money because people were not really showing up to the gig. He was like live streaming the concerts, but he wasn't charging anybody to watch. And then they found him in his house. He passed away. Found him in his house, and the dude is like in his 50s.
Wow.
some different stuff. So so that gig at that venue ended, and so I moved the gig to just doing live streams in my office.
Nice.
We started doing live streams once a month just to keep it going. And then when we got this club date again, I've been playing there for, this will be the third month in this venue, this new venue called Blue Note Jazz Cafe.
Nice.
BLU, no E.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, we're playing tomorrow at 7, and so I live streamed the did I live stream the first one? Yeah, I think I live streamed. Yes, no, last month was the first time there.
Oh,
this is the second time there.
Okay.
So yeah, I live streamed it from there, and it was great. I mean, there was a few people in the club. It's a kind of a smaller place,
right?
So there were a few people in the club, but man, the people were super generous and stuff, super chats, and you know, I had my Cash App on there, Venmo and all that stuff, and I was frequently saying something, you know, hey, if you want to support like this, and I after the gig, I mean, it sweetened everybody's bread, so it was a good thing. So I think the live streaming thing is going to be sort of, I think that's going to continue even when playing at live venues.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You know.
Yep. I believe it is.
I suppose that's a positive. That is a positive thing.
It is. It's the new norm.
I'm looking hard for positive.
Right. Yeah. We have to. We have to. I really believe it's the new norm. And I think even, you know, when it's safe for venues to open up fully and all that stuff, I think there's still going to be a live stream going, you know, so you might have the venues that have a full audience, but they'll probably also have that live stream audience, which is even better. It's more lucrative that way because you can have, you know, just charge two different things, but yeah.
That's right. And a matter of fact, when I agreed to move my band to the venue, you know, that was one of my first things, you know, can I live stream? Because I knew that was going to be a way to make more money for the band.
Yes.
So
you got to pay the band.
I mean, but you know, we have that's right. I mean, we have there's a agreed upon rate. It's a flat rate that we're going to get no matter what. That's what the club is paying. But just having that extra is just, you know, it just helps. And yes, I do think that's going to be the new normal. Yeah.
I mean, even with churches, you know, I think once, you know, if churches open back up fully, they're still going to have that. Because I don't know, you've probably heard of some churches too, but there's a lot of churches doing better now. You know, there's some that aren't doing well at all. You know, they had to shut down and all, but there's some doing better now than they were already doing well before COVID, you know, before the pandemic started. Right. So they're not going to go backwards, I don't think. So I wouldn't.
So the church that I work at, there was no apparatus for live streaming. So I was bringing my own cameras, like webcams and stuff. And we were doing like Zoom sessions and then streaming to like Facebook and stuff. And then we got, you know, cameras. So we've got 2 PTZ cameras.
Right.
And you know, and it's the whole thing, and everything is streamed. So every week is streamed. We've got a sound guy now. Before it was all volunteers, which they did, you know, a good job. But having somebody that, you know, is on the payroll is better. Because you know, you can. Well, you could. Well, you need a fall guy.
Yeah, you do.
You need to be able to point at someone and say, "You."
You did it. I mean,
That's right.
the sound guy is always a fault guy.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, all right. So I want to ask you. I want to ask you about this. Okay. So. Okay. So one of the things about being a musician, you know, a professional musician, in particular, a touring musician, but pretty much any kind of musician where you're spending a lot of hours. You know, I always tell my students, if you're successful as a musician, then when the 9 to 5 person is on, you're on. And when the 9 to 5 person is off, you're on.
Right.
Right?
That's 100%.
So holidays, you're on. They're off, but you're on.
Right. You're on because they're off.
That's right. That's right. And you're going to be providing the entertainment for them being off.
Exactly.
That's how that works.
Yep.
Now, it takes a special person to understand that and to not see that as some sort of competition. I'm talking about romantically.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think that maybe more often than not, the relationships that musicians have seem to be more transient and volatile, just to put it
Nicely.
mildly. Yeah.
Right.
Nicely, right.
Yeah.
I don't need any, you don't have to give me any details or anything. That's not what I'm asking for.
Right.
But, I mean, how important is the person having the sort of right disposition to sort of understanding that this is going to be a major time commitment. I have to do this. I don't have a choice. It's not that I'm choosing this over you. It's just that this is the gig.
Right. Yeah. It's extremely important. And sometimes it's the deal breaker between dating a non-musician and a musician. I hear a lot, myself and a lot of my peers say, you know, I want to date and marry someone that's not a musician for XYZ reasons. But a lot of us end up at least dating musicians because they're usually the first to understand the schedule and the demand and the dedication and all that stuff. I was actually just talking about that yesterday. And my run-ins have been, I've dated both, you know, non-musicians and musicians. And a lot of times with the non-musicians, they'll have a respect and fascination even for what you do and how dedicated you are and, you know, what you're accomplishing by being dedicated and all that stuff. But when it comes down to you choosing your craft and your instrument over them, a lot of times they can't figure out that it's not that you are in essence choosing your instrument over them, but it's not like a personal thing. Like, it's not that I don't really like you. I really like you, but I have a job to do. And you're going to put that first versus sometimes, and I've dated, you know, musicians and, you know, they'll understand like, oh yeah, I understand you have to, I can't see you tonight. You know, he'll say, I get it. You have to, you know, study for this concert or whatever the case is, a rehearsal, you know, but a lot of times the musicians will understand. So it's a tough, but it's very important. I mean, if you can't understand and respect, even if you can't understand, so say it's someone, I'd be dating a guy that's not a musician, but if he has a respect factor of, and an understanding to know that it's not a personal thing, but she has to do what she has to do, it'll work. But that's not usually That's not usually what happens. Yeah, usually, oh, she must not really be into me. No, it's not that. It's not that at all. So yeah, it can be a little challenge. And then also, not only that, but scheduling, going back to that 9 to 5 thing versus the not 9 to 5. I've had some interesting, beginning conversations. Oh, I want to take you out. When can I take you out? And I'm like, Tuesday, 12 noon. They're like, what? Most people do social things in the evenings and on weekends. And I'm like, oh no, that's prime time. I can't, sorry, just not negotiable. So that's another thing.
Yeah. I'm in my second marriage, and yeah, I mean, the first marriage, she was not a musician.
Okay.
Now there was all kinds of other issues that I'm not going to lay at the feet of incongruence based on a normie. I'm sorry.
I get
it. But yeah. But a lot of the issues were sort of surrounding that kind of thing. And my wife now, she's a dancer. She's a dancer, choreographer. She has her own dance company. She's got a lot of her own projects that she's working on.
That's
and
amazing.
so it seems like what's happened here is I have projects that I have to work on that are time intensive. She has projects that she has to work on that are time intensive. And then one of the projects that we mutually work on is our son.
Yeah, that's a whole project. Yeah.
That's right. He's 7, so he's a project.
Yeah,
but he's a good project. He's a good boy.
Oh, wow, nice.
He's a good boy. But yeah, that the relationship thing is that's a tough thing, because even if you get all of the other stuff right, if you get that wrong, you might as well have gotten everything else wrong too.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've seen some of my friends date others, other musician friends, and I see that, like, it's like that, that person that they're dating gets everything else right, but they mess up with that one thing. And it's like, oh, that's yesterday's news at that point. It's like, yeah, it's a deal breaker for most of us. It's a deal breaker.
And of course, I have a series of videos on my YouTube channel called Blue Pill Testimonials. And basically what they are is they are, I've tried to hide people's identities and stuff. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but I'm basically, it's very candid. I'm, talking about certain failures, things that have happened relationship wise. And the idea here is to try to help, in particular, to help men to not make some of those mistakes and to see certain red flags maybe that I didn't see, or that I saw but I just went right through the sign,
Right.
That kind of thing.
Nice.
The state of the dating market is pretty garbage, especially for Christians, I think. Because of what the expectations are, and there's certain things that maybe that you don't want to have, that you don't want to participate in, that you don't want to. No, I'm not going to do that. That's not what I'm trying to do, and
right.
That a lot of times can, with that. Well, I guess you're off the list now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I really fear for my son, honestly, because I think that with the rise of dating apps and social media, it has exacerbated and accelerated an already not ideal situation.
Right. That's 100% accurate. Too, I think in reference to the social media thing, I think one big mistake, unless you already know that person on social media, is when you're maybe talking to someone new and you like look up their social profile.
Oh yeah, and all their old stuff is right there.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's the worst thing you could ever do. Either way,
Okay, now I'm gonna ask this. This is a little different because. So. So there is this thing where now it doesn't work this way for guys because men, they don't want to know your past. Like they don't want to know a bunch of like, and I dated this guy and I used to date this, baller and then this other person. They don't want to know.
They don't want to know. Yeah.
But often it seems that the case is not necessarily proportionate the other way. It almost seems that as a guy, if you have a track record, if you have, whatever, then it's almost like, well, if they liked him, I'll like him too. There almost seems like there's like this psychological thing. So it's not a proportionate. It's not a direct relationship there. It seems like it seems like it's almost a plus. It's like a pre-selection. It's like, well, somebody else wanted him, so then I want him too. But the other one is like the tendency is guys, they don't necessarily want somebody that, I'm sorry to say this, that everybody already had. So, sorry to say it that way. What do you think?
That's what it is.
Do you think that's accurate?
I think that's entirely accurate. I could even say for myself, like, even, especially in the past, I don't want to say Inspector Gadget, but like, if there's a guy I have my eyes on, I'll want to like see if I can electronically find online, I'll look at his
cyber stalker.
Oh no, I can't go that far. But like, if you know this guy and you see a history of who he's dating, online, like post pictures. First of all, a lot of guys don't post a lot of pictures and stuff about the girls that they're dating. But if I happen to see a guy, I'm like, I wonder what his type is. I want to see what type of women he was dating. I think that's another important thing too to kind of check out if you're able, without stalking, of course. But yeah, but like you said, guys, they just want to be the only one in your life at that time. They don't want to know about who all you dated. But us women, we want to know everything. We want to know your social security number. We want to know where you work. We want to know everything. But now some women, I will say, and I'm sure they could probably say for themselves as well, go way too far. I think there's some things you should just not try to find out. Get to know the guy. Let him tell you, what he wants you to know. But don't go in blind, like you don't know where he's from or anything. But yeah, I think us women, we want to know everything we can possibly know. And then the guy, they just want to know, in my opinion, it seems like they want to know as much as they can about you, but in the here and now, not so much your past, like you said. So
right.
That's what it is.
Now, let me ask you this about the church maybe that you play at, or some of the churches that you play at. Are they black churches? Are they integrated churches? What kind of churches?
They've been predominantly black churches. Apostolic, Baptist. So like my home church is different, like Pentecostal, Apostolic, but the church that I play for more is Baptist. And even in my experiences, the Baptist churches I've been playing for are different types of Baptists, so I've seen a variety. I haven't played in like any, not on a regular basis, like Methodist churches or anything like that, but here and there. Seventh-day Adventists, I love playing for those, as well. So I haven't done too many of those during a pandemic, but yeah, those as well. So.
Now, part of the reason I'm asking you that, or maybe the main reason I'm asking you, is so I did. There's a YouTuber. He's one of the founders of the Black Manosphere. His name is O'Shea Duke Jackson. He's got 126,000 subscribers or something. And I put together a panel discussion. He's a Christian. He's pro-black. He's he describes himself as being a black nationalist, and so anyhow, I put together a panel, and there were two pastors on the panel, two musicians, not including myself, and then there was a PK.
Right.
Well, actually, about three of them were PKs, but one of them was a PK that's also like a motivational speaker. I went to school with him. So anyhow, we did this on his channel, and the name of the stream, it was about 2 hours and change. The name of the stream was "Why Are Black Men Leaving the Black Church?" Wow. Okay. Now, this is where I'm going. Watch where I'm going. Watch where I'm going. So, so it seems, it doesn't just seem, but it is a fact that black men, that when you go to a black church, that there's a lot of women.
Oh, right.
But not necessarily a lot of men. And if you are trying to date and you're trying to do the Christian thing, it can make it very challenging because it seems like the men are missing.
Right.
But we had a very engaging conversation about that. It had 700 or 800 live viewers for the whole conversation, and I don't know. I think that video's got about 20,000. It has about 20,000 views now, and it was just done this past Friday. We're going to do another one this coming Friday. It's interesting because it's kind of a niche topic. Right, this connecting the sort of black manosphere with the black church, and okay, so why, that sort of connection is interesting. But what seems to be happening is the black men that normally would be involved in the black church, and historically so were involved in black church, they're now almost all of them are in the manosphere now. And there seems to be a disconnect with what it is that the church is providing, and it seems that the black church, seems to be more focused on serving, obviously, the people that are there, which tends to be women, and that seems to be leaving out a lot of the men with whatever their concerns are. Yeah. Yeah. So I was, but I am curious as to what your experience has been in church. Has it been sort of pretty thin with respect to guys?
It has.
Churches?
It has. A lot of times the only guys that I'm really surrounded by are the guys that I'm actually in a band with. So as far as like looking out, the musicians, as far as looking out into like, say, the congregation and meeting different guys, you rarely see most of the guys that you might see, that I've seen in my experience in the church, are the ones that are in a family, so as far as like, and then, every now and again, you'll meet a guy that's, might approach me in a church, but it gets weird because it's like this intimidating, like, I can't date her. Look at her, like, she's a musician. She's doing this, that, and the other. And it's like, but I'm still a human, you know. So it is. It's just, oh gosh, yeah, slim pickings in the church, slim pickings in the church, and I, you know, too, in my experience, you know, you do meet some guys here and there that aren't musicians in the church, but I see a different vibe from the guys that I meet that aren't in the church, like don't go to church on a regular basis, but they might still have a healthy respect for God and believe in God and everything. It's different. It's almost weird because I can date a guy that I didn't meet in church, and then I can meet a guy that I did meet in church, and 9 times out of 10, I'll trust the guy that I didn't meet in church. Because a lot of times, and this probably is a whole nother topic, some of the guys that I'll meet in church have this thing where it's like, you can tell they're hiding something. I don't know if the church is teaching them to be a certain way, conform to just strict Christian ways. I don't know what it is, but a lot of times the guys that you meet outside of church is just like, hey, this is who I am. You know, this is how I am. This is how I live my life. I love God, but I'm going to do X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z. You know, I can trust someone like that because they're telling you who they are. But a lot of times the guys that you meet in church, they're not telling you who they are. They're telling you who they think you want to know.
Right.
So,
they're telling you who they're supposed to be.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who they think you, yeah. Like guys out that you meet outside of the church, they say, hey, I'm just out here in these streets.
Right. 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 I'm like, shoot, I can rock with that, you know, versus, you know, and not every guy is the same, just like not every woman is the same. Not all of us are the same, but the majority you meet in the church tend to have that I'm hiding something vibe, you know, so.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So are you? So this part of the conversation, this is very interesting to me because of my participation in some panel discussions in the Black Manosphere, and because of some of my interviews of some of the folks from that sphere. And some of the points that they tend to raise consistently, and that I've found to be pretty much true. But would you be so I'm thinking about putting together a sort of panel, for it'll be like a panel discussion. It'll be different kinds of folks, and we basically would be talking about relationships and stuff, sort of the state of Black love, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I want to have some folks that are married, some people that are single, some folks that are dating, you know, like that. It's just different folks. Would you be into that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. Yeah,
that would be interesting. All right. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and we could just keep going because it was this was really great. You're very easy to talk to.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad. You too. This is fun. This was fun.
All right. Well, God bless you, and I will be talking to you.
Okay, sounds good. Blessings. Talk to you soon.
All right. Now have a good one.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.